Welcome everybody to our first seminar of the day. This is Spring Clean Your CV, and I'm going to introduce Angela Collins. She is the Head of Careers at SETU in Waterford. So she'll take you through the presentation, and then any questions at the end, let us know, or Angela is maybe available for 5 or 10 minutes after privately. So I'll hand it over to our Angela here. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, good afternoon everybody, and thanks a million for... Oh, no, I just wonder what channel? Channel 1. Sorry, thank you. Thanks very much for coming along to Spring Clean Your CV. I say my name is Angela and I'm the Careers Advisor in SETU Waterford. And the presentation is being recorded. It will be up on the Grad Ireland website, so it'll be available for you as well. So there's probably, in some of the slides have a little bit too much detail, but just from working in careers for 30 years, the more detail, the more information you get, I hope will help you. So thank you very much. So just some five tips, I suppose, first in one way to tell you what I'm hoping you'll cover in here. So show that you make, show what makes you unique. So when you are putting your CV together, you could be competing with your classmates, your other colleges, students from other colleges. So again, every job you apply for will be different. So tweak your CV for every job you're applying for. Choose a clear layout. Again, for someone who reviews thousands of CVs, people often download CV templates and it's really distracting. You might find there's a column to the left that you write down, there's a column to the right you write across. So a plain Word document is the best to use. And sometimes students say, well, look, that won't make me stand out. It can make you stand out if it's done well. Okay? Tailor your CV for your audience. So know the company you're applying for, know the job you're applying for as well. Look at the job description, look at your CV, and make sure all the skills they mention in the job description, you have them in your CV. And that's one thing I see is missing from a lot of CVs. So again, know your audience. Keep it error-free. Often we copy and paste from different CVs or different documents to put into our CV. And yet you might have something written that you have very good attention to detail. Yet I will see errors and the employers will see errors. So again, make sure it's error-free. Again, keep your CV up to date. So that's why I suppose today's topic in Grad Ireland have asked me to talk about Spring Clean Your CV. So make sure that it's up to date. Look at what you've been doing. If you've come back from work experience, then you might get rid of one of your previous jobs and you'll put in your work experience and related experience there. So doing a spring clean of your CV will help you get more interviews as well. Again, an experienced person looking at CVs will know that if it's just one CV you have and you haven't made an effort with it. Okay, so I always ask this question. I know it's not the best environment, so I'll kind of give you the answers to these coming up. What is the purpose of your CV? For somebody who's worked in careers for 30 years and I'm reviewing lots of CVs, if you said to each student who's putting their CV together, what's the purpose of this CV? I think everybody would approach their CV differently. So what's the purpose? We're going to look at the main sections as a graduate or a new graduate coming out, or somebody who maybe has 1 or 2 years experience, what should go in their CV, some general guidelines. And again, we're going to look at CVs and covering letters as well, because covering letters have come back and employers are asking students to submit a covering letter. And one thing I'd say, your covering letter is not your email to the employer. It's not the first page of your CV. It's a separate document. Okay? When you're putting your CV together again, when you're creating a CV, you need to start assessing and looking back, what are the skills and abilities that you have? So recap on those and you make sure they go into your CV. So review what you've been doing. So look at what you've been doing. Look also at what you've achieved to date. And then what skills contribute to these? So even if it's hobbies and interests, and if you're somebody who does a lot of training, trains with the county team, does triathlons, trains every week, there's skills attached to that are transferable. And they could be time management, organisation skills, problem solving, working under pressure, to get in your training, also to get to college. So they're all skills that you can use and bring to and put on your CV. And the good thing about those skills is if you go for an interview and an employer says to you, look, Angela, you don't have experience in this area, you say, look, I don't, but I do have the skills that you mentioned on the job spec. So don't forget about the skills that you have. You may take some of them for granted, but look at the job description, then look at your CV and make sure they're in it. So I asked you the question, what's the purpose of your CV? It is hopefully to get an interview. Also, it is to test if you can communicate the right level of detail in the right way. So you have a 2-page document that needs to communicate to a potential employer that you have the skills and experience to suit that company. It is your sales brochure, so it will sell you to that company no matter what discipline you're in. It will outline your education and your experience to date. The experience you have to date could be volunteering, it could be unrelated work experience, it could be experience you got from a college work placement as well. And then it should demonstrate a match between your skills and the skills the employer has. So always go back to the job spec, look at what they're looking for. Have you got it? If you've got it, make sure then it's in your CV. Often what happens, students apply for a job because they look at the job description and they apply, but they don't mention the skills. So when an employer is reviewing your CV, they don't see the skills that they looked for mentioned on your CV, and you may get deleted. So an effective CV hopefully will increase your chances of getting an interview. Not always a job, but the flip side of that is if you don't put in the CV and it's just a generic CV that you're just thrown together, you certainly could end up in the bin. So employers get a lot of CVs. So how long do you think an employer spends looking at your CV at a first glance? Okay, it is down to seconds. Does that seem like a lot? No. So could it taken you an hour maybe to put your CV together? But an experienced person reviewing your CV will know in seconds. They will scan it. Is the personal information there? Is the educational information there? Are there skills there? Is there work experience related, unrelated? Are there language skills? Are there computer skills? They'll check for those headings and they'll know. But obviously, if you're the right choice for them, they'll go back and review it in more detail. But it is down to seconds. So remember, the employer should and hopefully define the job and the role in the job description. So always go back to the job description. The job description should be there when you're applying for jobs. Hopefully they will identify the key skills and attributes for that job. And then they're going to shortlist. They look at your CV, they look at the job spec and say, look, this is what we asked for. Do they have it? If they have it, where is it in their CV? Where did they gain that skill? Was it volunteering? Was it a class rep? Was it a student union position? Was it their volunteering? Was it work placement? Okay, so always be explicit, and this is called tailoring your CV. So 3 rules with your CV: keep it simple, clear, and short. Okay, as a raw graduate coming out, there isn't a major problem if your CV goes on to 2.5 pages. But if you're going 3 and 4 pages because you haven't laid it out right, that's a challenge then for an employer. And again, customize your CV for every position you're going for, or customize it or tailor it. So targeting your CV, what does that mean? So you're looking at a job spec and then you're looking at your CV. Read it, okay? Look at the job description or the job specification or person specification. So that can often be divided up to essential and desirable. So make sure if you have all the essential that they're looking for, make sure it's on your CV. They may also then have desirable areas that they're looking for. If you have those, again, put them into your CV, okay? Because at the end of the day, for an employer, it is a matching process. They look at the job description, they look at your CV, and that's the size whether you're called for interview or not. Okay, so checklist for your CVs, and this is an area that I find a lot of mistakes. Ideally 2 pages, and sometimes it can go on to 3 because your footers and headers can be very, very long. So again, keep an eye on the footers and headers of your CV. A plain Word document is the best to use. Avoid the templates. Check your punctuation, grammar and spellings. So an employer is hiring you, so they want your good attention to detail. Also, they want you to write. They might ask you to be organising meetings, sending emails. And if their first impression of you is the mistakes in your CV, they may say, look, I'm not going to take a chance. We need this person to be able to write well, communicate well, and the first impression I have of them is their CV, and that's not evident. Okay? Check the font sizes as well is important. Don't, I suppose, save your CV as a PDF until someone checks it, just to have it right, okay? But before you send it off, obviously save it using your name and in a PDF. Experiment with the layout. Again, I often find there's large footers and the heading and the margins can be very wide as well, and that you're wasting a lot of space. Don't have any gaps in your history. So account for what you've doing. If you were in college, you left the course, you took a year out, be upfront, mention it. Took a year out, it wasn't for me, I travelled, I worked in a local shop, I volunteered. But don't have gaps in your CV. Gaps cause questions. Avoid using I the whole time as well, because when an employer is reviewing your CV and they're reading, I did this, I did that, I did the other, it's hard going, okay? So use an action word to save you using I. There's no need for a cover sheet or binding, okay? Save your CV not as my CV. So hands up who's got their CV saved as my CV. Well, you must be very different. The majority of CVs I get are saved as my CV because it is your CV when you're working on it. So you have it saved, my CV. But then you forget when you're sending to an employer or a careers advisor to check it, my CV is on it. So always save your CV using your name. Again, I would suggest avoid using tables in your CV. They can take up a lot of space and it's hard on the reader as well. Bold your headings, don't underline them. Again, employers like the headings bold and not underlined, and certainly don't do both. Okay, so I'm basing my, I suppose, this checklist and my presentation on every summer we survey employers, ask them for hints and tips, or ask them for areas where students make mistakes. So this is the feedback from that. Again, use bullet points to save having long sentences and long narrative. The action words, again, I recommend use organised, planned, initiated, took responsibility for. No photographs on your CV. You're all handsome, good-looking, attractive, but employers do not want and shouldn't be asking for photographs in your CV. Limit your use of colour. Black and white is probably the easiest on your CV, okay? And again, avoid using templates, as I mentioned, and just save it in Word. So just a simple format of a CV we have. Again, you'll write the name of it and write across your address, your telephone number, your email. Then you're starting with, if you're in college now, college is first and you work back. Educate the employer. Let them know the subject you're doing. Don't take for granted that they'll know all about your course, okay? Any final year projects you've done, it's good as well to educate the employer on those. And then maybe if you've, depending on your courses, if you've additional projects, if you've done any site visits, if there's anything that you've done that's related to your course that could help. So an employer may ask you, are you familiar with the following? You say, look, for my final year project, I took on that topic. Also, when I was in college, we got an opportunity to visit one of the companies, and that's the area we got to get a presentation on. So let them know if there's anything that you have done or experienced that's related to the company or their business. Let them know. If it's not said, it's not heard. And if it's not written in your CV, they won't be able to read it. Okay? Then you can maybe put your second level education there as well. Don't need... Just a second. And you don't need to go into too much detail on your second level education. Then it's down to your work experience, related or unrelated, even if you're working in a farm, volunteering, follow this structure. The name of the organisation, where they're based, what was the position you had, the date you did it. Then talk about your duties, but then mention the skills you gained. And what I find when it comes to skills gained, a lot of students focus on the technical skills. But I'm here, what we want here is your core skills, your transferable skills, time management, working under pressure, organisation skills, attention to detail, all those skills there for your work experience. Again, your computer skills, whatever you have, any programs, packages, mention them. Even if there's ones you're familiar with, mention those there. Any language skills. If English is your first language, you don't need to put down English. But if you have additional languages, put them down. If English isn't your first language, mention English and the other languages you have as well. And then your interests and hobbies can be mentioned there as well. Okay. Referees, always ask permission for your referees. If you're in college, try and get an academic referee and then somebody else. If you can't get the referees, you can always say references available on request. So I've just put down here then some action words you can use on your CVs as well, if needed. I don't expect you to be able to read all these now, but the presentation will be up on the Grad Ireland site. So these are a number of, I suppose, our skills that we've put together and action words that you can use for your CV. So some common questions that I'm asked: should I include the following in my CV? Students ask me about a personal profile, or should I put it in, or a summary. I would say it's optional. But ask yourself, if I'm writing a profile, personal profile, or I'm doing a summary of my skills at the top of the CV, or a career objective, is it adding value? Am I putting in something that really I copied from someplace else, or am I writing something that's going to be written someplace else? So ask yourself, am I adding value? And if what I write, is it going to make a difference? And 9 times out of 10, a student who's just finished, a raw graduate, just coming out from an undergraduate degree, has got a master's, hasn't worked for a few years, I really don't know. My own personal opinion is, what are you going to write in your personal profile there that isn't mentioned below? Okay? Your date of birth, marital status, nationality shouldn't be asked for, and there's no need to put it on your CV. Okay? Again, often students ask me, if I write about my final year thesis or dissertation, what do I include? Again, it's at a high level. You'll mention the title of it and then 2 to 3 lines explaining it. So you undertook research, you designed, distributed some surveys, you analysed your findings, and you concluded. They're the main headings. And it's good if you start thinking about it for your CV. When you're called for an interview, it'll be easier for you to talk about it. Should you put in college projects? Yes. Again, the title and 1 to 2 lines about them. So basic principles to remember. Think of the relevance. Research the sector, the employer, and the job description. Again, the order that you put your CV together is important. You start now and work back. The format, make it easy for the reader. Attention to detail, and then attach it with a effective covering letter. So common mistakes again are spelling errors, too much or too little information, irrelevant details, no personality in your CV that you've kind of copied and pasted different sections, poor presentation, dull vocabulary. And that's what I often see, people copy and paste the same things from the skills from the previous job into the next one. And then it's too general and it's not targeted. So final points, start with a clear understanding of what the sector is looking for. So again, look at the job spec. Ensure your CV is targeted and relevant. Use the best examples you've got as well. And ask yourself, if I write this, so what? What does this mean for an employer? And then ask in others for some feedback, your career services as well. Do not lie in your CV, okay? Because lies can be checked. Covering letters. When you're putting together a covering letter, as I said earlier on, it is not the first page of your CV. It is a separate document and saved as a separate document as well. Spend a bit of time putting it together. In your covering letter, emphasize what you can do for the employer in your covering letter. Don't be afraid to be enthusiastic, and also it needs to be polite and not overly formal. So the different headings to include: the opening, say which job you're applying for and where you saw it. Why you? Tell them why you're a good candidate for that particular role. And again, link back to the job description. I see in the job description you look for whatever. While I was on work experience, I got experience in that area. Why them? Why do you want to work with them? They were the Grad Ireland top employer this year. They came on campus, did a presentation. You were very interested in them. The end then that you're thank them again for reviewing your CV and you're available for interview. Again, for all of us, if you get a Dear Sir or Madam email or letter in the door, you may not treat it with such importance. And the same will happen for employers. So try and find out who you're writing to and have it Dear Mr. or Mrs. whoever it is, and then you sign it off yours sincerely. If it is hard to get a name, it's Dear Sir or Madam, and then it's yours faithfully. So with your covering letter, highlight the key skills you have that will add value. The opening paragraph, online purpose of the letter, so that's who are you writing to, which specific job, why do you want that job, what have you got to offer them, why your interest in this employer is important as well, and then your closing paragraph. So just in summary, just check, are we okay for time? So construct your CV with the prospective employer in mind. Do tailor your CV to the job, so important. Do make your CV clear, neat and tidy. Do view your experience in a positive light, no matter what the experience is. Do place the important information up front. Do put your name and email address on every page. Use positive language is important. Do quote concrete outcomes to support your claims as well. Don't include information which may be viewed negatively. If you failed exams, I'm not asking you to lie, but there's certain information you don't need to put in your CV. But if someone asks you at an interview, did you ever fail an exam? Obviously be upfront and honest. Don't include any information that might discriminate against you. Again, don't include salary information and expectations. And again, don't make your CV more than 2 pages long. But again, I would say if you're a raw graduate coming out, it's okay if it goes to 2.5 pages. And then don't dilute the important message. Don't use jargon that may not be, or acronyms that may not be familiar to employers. Don't lie. And don't include a photograph unless asked. And really, you shouldn't be asked probably for a photograph at this stage either. So just to end, I suppose, think of it when you're putting your CV together. You have the employer's perspective. They will put together a job specification that will have the qualifications, the experience and your expertise. Then they will shortlist based on your CV. If there's a clear match, you're called for an interview. If there isn't a clear match, it's deleted. So you as an employee, a potential employee, analyse the vacancy. Analyse your suitability for it. Then option A is to demonstrate a clear match in your CV. That increases your chances of an interview. And if you don't do that, if it's a generic CV, it could be rejected. So always think of the reader, which could be a potential employer. So again, if you're looking for a lot more resources than any of these, Grad Ireland do have an excellent section on CVs, application and tests. And also, any of your career services are there to help you as well. And today there is a CV clinic available. So thank you very much for joining, and I say sorry about the delay in the beginning with just getting the speaker working. So I'm here for a few minutes if anyone wants to come up and ask me a question. So thanks very much. Appreciate that.